As the saying goes, the hay is in the barn. My final picks are in for my final 2024 NFL mock draft. We're going over it here today on Locked On NFL Scouting.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is better than this? It's a guy being a dude here on a late Wednesday night. Happy NFL Draft Eve to all who celebrate. I'm your co-host here on Locked On NFL Scouting, Kyle Krabs, your solo host here on this late night episode of the show, because Joe Marino already put his mock draft in earlier today on Wednesday. It is 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the East Coast. We are about 24 hours away from the end of the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft. And I've put myself together a mock. We're going to go through it here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I want to give a special shout out to our everydayers because it is your teams every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll admit it, I have a competitive side, and nothing scratches the itch of my competitive side quite like Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. This is the submission that I have in for the Huddle Report competition, which if you're not familiar, Robbie and the rest of the crew over there at the Huddle Report do an outstanding job on an annual basis of collecting everybody's mock drafts and grading them in real time. And you get 2 points for every match for a player and a team. It doesn't matter where it happens in the first round. So it can be first overall or 32nd overall. But if you get the team and the player right, you get 2 matches. And for every player you correctly put into the first round, you get 1 point. So kind of your general rule of thumb is you give yourself a chance to win if you can get 45 plus points. So I'm not a math guy, but that is a grand total of 12 matches would be 24 points. And then if you had 22 correct players in out of 32 with 12 matches, that's 44 points. So 13 matches gets you get about a third of the first round right, and you get about 3/4 of the players in the first round. You give yourself a chance to have the best mock in the competition. So I have not won it. Joe's won it once. He rubs it in my face every year. And here's to this being the year where we get the big breakthrough. So I have my 1 through 32 put together. It includes a couple trades. We'll go through them here on the show and just kind of introduce you guys my final 2024 NFL mock and the picks as they fell. I chose to stay chalk through the first 4 picks. So the Bears, Commanders, Patriots, and Cardinals, those teams staying with the Bears taking Caleb Williams at number 1. There's no surprise there. That's been long assumed. They moved on from Justin Fields, took all the mystery out of that pick. The Bears going Caleb Williams at number 1. Washington, we saw the betting odds kind of do the carousel over the course of the past week. It eventually came back to where it started, which was Jaden Daniels, the quarterback from LSU, Heisman Trophy winner. He is my pick at number 2 for the Washington Commanders. The New England Patriots at number 3. I went back and forth on a couple different fronts. It sounds like they are a little bit divided on what they would like to do. It sounds like there's interest from different parties within football operations on whether they want to go quarterback at all. Or if they do go quarterback, it sounds like ownership kind of likes J.J. McCarthy. Look, Michigan quarterback, I get it. But if you're going to compromise, and there's people that don't want a quarterback at all, and then there's people that want a quarterback, and then there's people that like a certain quarterback, it sounds like the compromise, the middle ground, is Drake Maye from North Carolina. And that is the player. I do not think it's a coincidence that it seems like all the teams that would be calling to trade up for a quarterback, if they got past 3 or at the 3rd overall pick, they're all interested in Drake Maye. So I think the Patriots will make Drake Maye their selection at number 3 overall. Again, I'm staying chalk here. And then the Cardinals at 4, with Maye off the board, I think some of the incentive to really get aggressive with a trade comes out, and Marvin Harrison Jr. is the pick at number 4 for the Arizona Cardinals. Things get weird at 5. I think the Chargers would love to move down. to get appropriate value, but it really feels like their guy is J.C. Latham, the right tackle from Alabama. And look, Harbaugh coming in, they're going to run the ball. That right tackle spot with Trey Pipkins, I know they gave him a contract last offseason, but he didn't perform to the same level he did the previous season. Him being OT1 off the board is a little bit of a surprise, but I know Daniel Jeremiah, who calls the games for the Chargers, has Latham going 5. That in itself is enough for me to say, hey, I've heard the buzz myself. I was thinking about doing it. And then DJ puts it in his mock. And that was all a conviction for me to say, okay, yeah, we're going down with the ship. Things continue to get weird at number 6 with the New York Giants. I have them selecting quarterback J.J. McCarthy. They have the luxury of distance for if there is a hypothetical Cardinals trade down. I think the Giants being in a spot where the Cardinals would not have to jump through hoops to go down to potentially 11 and then come back up. Well, they've shown a willingness to move up and down the board at free will, and maybe they get galaxy brained and do it. For me, it's a lot easier to say that J.J. McCarthy ends up in New York with the Giants. They've done a lot of work with J.J. McCarthy. I heard they spent Easter with him and kind of their pre-draft process. Spent a lot of time trying to get a feel for him. It feels like Drake Maye's kind of their guy, but if they're done with Daniel Jones, they're done with Daniel Jones, right? So I have the Giants going J.J. McCarthy, quarterback, at number 6. Joe Alt, we're still chalk. We're back to chalk, I should say. Joe Alt's going to go at 7 to the Titans. There's a dire need. I know there's some murmurs and some whispers that, hey, don't sleep on wide receiver for them, and I totally get it. But this tackle run's going to happen, and it's going to get real ugly here in just a little bit. And I think that's really real. And for you to pick at 7, a tackle's off the board already, but you still have what is the de facto assumed top tackle. I think the Titans would be wise to make that selection. Now, pick number 8 is where I think things get really interesting because you have Atlanta. Atlanta's kind of been rumored as a defensive team. It would not be a surprise if Atlanta was a wide receiver team, I think. But I have them moving down out of this spot. I think the player that's frequently mocked to Atlanta, which is Dallas Turner, and we'll find out if that's the pick in segment 2 for them, is not a necessity to stick and pick at number 8 in my mind. So I have them moving down, and I have the Jacksonville Jaguars coming up for Malik Nabers from 17. Jacksonville was really trying to get Calvin Ridley back. It feels like there's still a hole in that wide receiver room in spite of all the skill players that they do have. And I think Nabers would be an outstanding transition and pivot for Jacksonville from what they had in Ridley. So I have the Jaguars coming up 9 spots for Malik Nabers to stop his slide and get in front of the Bears and Jets. The Bears stay in pick at 9, and they draft Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle from Texas. This is the top defensive player off the board. Well-deserved. He's my top-ranked defensive player in the class. And I know the Bears drafted a couple of interior defensive linemen last year, and they flashed a little bit. So I get it. But at the same time, I think Murphy's a different animal, and I think he'd really be a critical cog as compared to Gervin Dexter in the middle of that Bears defense. And those linebackers behind it, I think, would really thrive from his presence as well. And that brings us to number 10 with the Jets. I give him Rome Odunze here. Odunze would not surprise me if the Cardinals flip-flop spots with the Giants and the Chargers sticked and picked Marvin Harrison at 5. It would not surprise me if the Cardinals at 6 picked Odunze. Would not surprise me if the Bears pick Odunze. Would not surprise me if the Falcons pick Odunze. Would not surprise me if the Giants don't pick J.J. McCarthy and they just pick Odunze, right? But it feels like the floor for Rome Odunze is 10. And that's where I have him landing here in this mock with kind of the stage setting for some more quarterback drama when you consider Minnesota didn't get up and Denver picks right behind them. What do they choose to do? We'll get into all that next, but the top 10, Caleb Williams to the Bears, Jaden Daniels to the Commanders, Drake Maye to the Patriots, Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals, J.C. Latham to the Chargers, The Giants get J.J. McCarthy. The Titans get Joe Alt. The Jaguars trade up for Malik Nabers, Byron Murphy to the Bears, and Rome Odunze to the New York Jets. We have picks 11 through 20 coming up next, so make sure that you stick with us. I have quite the competitive side. I'm not afraid to admit it. And my competitive side just so happens to be a massive fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It has been downloaded over 150 million times. It is a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is messing with your friends, though. You charge them for your iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. But you can also heist their vaults for riches for yourself, and the leaderboard shows who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is at any given point. It's not just my competitive side that loves Monopoly Go. However, you can team up with friends and people all around the world in timed tournaments and earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now for free at the App Store or Google Play. You have all of the sports happening right now. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. It's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So we're going to go back on the clock with the Vikings at pick 11. And here's the deal for the Vikings. I think the unfortunate reality for them is they don't have the luxury of coming back at 23 if the Broncos are authentically interested in Bo Nix. So I'm buying the quarterback run happening. I'm putting Bo Nix at 11 to the Vikings. So the Vikings get a quarterback that I think is a pretty good scheme fit. If they really liked Drake Maye, I think Bo Nix on the lexicon of J.J. McCarthy, keep it between the lines, and Drake Maye, agent of chaos with gifted physical ability. I think Bo's a little bit in the middle of that spectrum. And this is just a supply and demand issue where you have the Broncos right behind you. You have the Raiders right behind that. And then you have some other teams that I know the Rams get alluded to as a potential quarterback spot. I don't think you can wait. So I have the Vikings going Bo Nix. As a result of that, I've seen both Daniel Jeremiah and Benjamin Albright, who's very plugged in on the Denver Broncos beat, have the Broncos trading down with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles coming up, whether it is for an offensive lineman, whether it is for a defensive lineman, whether it's for a corner, all of that can be debated. I'm going to buy them coming up. So I have the Eagles coming up to 12, and I have them drafting Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, a very complete corner that steps in for Philly when you consider Bradbury and Slay as guys that are getting a little bit older. Maybe you want a little bit more dynamic ability out of that group. Quinyon Mitchell brings you that. I think he's a very complete player, would be a great fit in the Fangio scheme. So Quinyon Mitchell, the top corner off the board, the second defensive player at number 12. The Raiders back on the clock at 13. I have them doing the thing. Yep. They're going to draft Michael Penix. And this is, I've been plenty skeptical of Penix as a player. He's obviously an outstanding story, outstanding leader. The Raiders need a quarterback, and this feels like the last chance to get one. It feels like the run is going to put you in a position where, especially with the Broncos trading down, that kind of leaves the door open, and the Rams are kind of out there as well with Stafford at the end of his leash. You might as well just jump on the train, right? So I have the Raiders at 13 going with Michael Penix. I think there's a vertical element of that offense that makes some sense with what Michael Penix does well. The Saints at 14, I think this is a trade-up candidate. New Orleans, I think, is a very good trade-up candidate because they historically have always gone up and got their guys. I have them drafting Olu Fashanu at 14. So they're a little bit fortunate that the Eagles come up for a corner. There's two quarterbacks that go outside the top 10. It kind of bails the Saints out picking at 14, where they still get OT3. But it feels like this offensive line run is on the precipice and getting ready to tip over. And I have it kind of starting here with the Saints with Olu Fashanu. The Colts at 15, I was split between three players, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, and the player I ultimately did give them, which was Brock Bowers. Otherwise, I'm going to have a really hard time finding a spot in the top 20 for Brock Bowers. And I think he does go in the top 20. I know Chris Ballard came out and said we got to protect and give weapons to Anthony Richardson. I know they've invested in a lot of tight ends. It's kind of been a spot that they're not afraid to spend reasonable draft capital at. I kind of come back to the well and say, well, this is an offensive weapon player who just so happens to be categorized as a tight end. I think the more versatility that your offensive personnel can have with a quarterback like Richardson who can contribute in the quarterback run game, I think you really lean into that. And I give the Colts Brock Bowers here at pick 15. The Seahawks at 16. I know Troy Fautanu was a popular mock pick. I have them drafting Graham Barton. I think Graham Barton gives them a little bit more personnel flexibility for what that interior of that offensive line can look like. It seems like this has become the consensus center in this class, whether he plays center or guard for Seattle. I think his versatility would be a really welcomed addition for the Seahawks as a team that had their entire interior offensive line gutted in free agency this past year. So I have the Seahawks at 16. Thought about them being a trade down candidate. Didn't really have after I had Jacksonville go up at 17. I didn't really have the itch to scratch to have somebody come up to 16 and jump in front. So I had the Seahawks picking and sticking and picking. It's almost midnight. Give me a break. Sticking and picking Graham Barton at 16. The Falcons at 17 get the player that I would have given them at 8 anyway, with all the extra draft capital that they get. Dallas Turner, the edge from Alabama, goes at 17 to the Falcons. The Cincinnati Bengals at 18. I thought about edge here. I thought about Jared Verse. But then I remembered that they absolutely do not care about your trade requests. So Trey Hendrickson came out and requested a trade today. But it's not going to push me off of offensive line. I have Talise Fuaga from Oregon State as a really nice, for a team that has not been able to run the ball. I think Fuaga gives you a totally different element in your run game. And I really like that fit for Cincinnati. So I have Talise Fuaga going from wearing orange and black in the Pacific Northwest to going to Ohio to wear orange and black. The Rams at 19, Leatu Latu, edge rusher, UCLA, in the Rams' backyard. Outstanding performance as a pass rusher. The Rams need this kind of player after losing Aaron Donald. There's not an interior player with a clean bill of health. I think Johnny Newton would otherwise be worth the consideration here, but with him not, and of course Latu has a medical series of questions that I don't envy any team trying to find any peace of mind with, but it sounds like some teams are either all the way in or all the way out on Latu. And the Rams first round pick in about 7 years, probably not going to be unwilling to take on a little bit of risk to swing for the fences, because that's always kind of been Les Snead's deal. So I have them drafting Leatu Latu at pick number 19. And then the Steelers at pick 20 draft Troy Fautanu from Washington, whether he's a tackle, whether he's your left tackle, whether he plays inside. That is the kind of vicious player in the trenches that if he's there for Pittsburgh, I know they've been pegged as kind of the Graham Barton spot, but if he's there for Pittsburgh, I have a really hard time thinking that Pittsburgh doesn't take advantage and jump on that from a value proposition. So picks 11 through 20, the Vikings, Bo Nix, the Eagles trade up for Quinyon Mitchell, the Raiders draft Michael Penix, which finishes our quarterback run, and then the offensive line run starts. You have the Saints drafting Olu Fashanu, the Colts drafting Brock Bowers, the Seahawks staying and picking Graham Barton, the Falcons, after trading down with Jacksonville, get Talise Fuaga at 17. The Falcons get Dallas Turner after trading down with Jacksonville to 17. The Bengals get to Luis Fuaga at 18, Laiatu Latu to the Rams at 19, and Troy Fatanu to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 20. Picks 21 through 32 coming your way next. Stick with us. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to make sure that you have access to all of the quality professionals to make sure you get the hire right. That's why you want to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs help find the right tools and professionals for your team faster and for free, because LinkedIn is not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that small businesses wear so many hats, they might not have the time and resources they would love to have for the hiring process. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make that process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker than before. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, so why not you? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So the Miami Dolphins come on the board at pick number 21 on the heels of a disastrous stretch where they saw Fashanu, Bowers, Barton, Fuaga, Latu, and Fatanu come off the board with what, 5 of the 6 picks in front of them. But they still do, thanks to the quarterback run that happened, they still do have Jared Verse on the board. And with Jared Verse being a best player available situation for the Dolphins, who have a needed edge, but they like to invest in premium positions with their early draft capital anyway, all of that makes too much sense for me. I'm drafting Jared Verse to the Dolphins at number 21, and then the Broncos come on the board after they trade down from pick 12. And if you're not going to get a quarterback, right, because they kind of struck out on quarterbacks, they could have stayed and picked Penix. Felt like Bonix was a guy that they had a little bit more of a connection with in the pre-draft process, and felt like that he would have been more of an authentic target instead of just drafting the next quarterback for the sake of doing it. I think about the skill group. You've traded Jerry Jeudy. Cortland Sutton might get traded this weekend. How about Brian Thomas? Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, height, weight, speed type receiver, a lot of developmental upside. The whole selling point here is he wins down the field, but there's so much more he can grow into as a receiver. I think that Sean Payton's offense would love to have this kind of player within it. So I go with Brian Thomas to the Broncos at pick number 22. The Vikings back on the clock for their second pick. And listen, I ain't forget what this cornerback room looks like, right? We hammered the Vikings for the cornerback room all season long last year. So I have them drafting Nate Wiggins from Clemson at pick number 23. This is a really dynamic, twitchy, good ball skills type player. Maybe not the biggest guy, but the Vikings didn't really shy away from that with some of the corners that they had last year. So I have them going with Nate Wiggins at pick number 23. Dallas Cowboys at pick number 24. This one's a little bit of a surprise. I had somebody suggest this might be a possibility to me, and I really don't know what to do with Dallas otherwise. So I stayed and did it. I have them drafting wide receiver Xavier Worthy, the 40-yard dash champion from the University of Texas at Austin. Gets to stay in the Lone Star State and play for the Cowboys as the heir apparent to Brandon Cooks, but the really dynamic third weapon in the Cowboys passing offense. You thought about Jackson Powers Johnson or Zach Frazier, and I thought about it, but into your offensive line, you can consistently find starters a little bit later in the draft. So I think Dallas would come back to that and not risk missing out on the ability to have a needle-moving talent that they add to their skill group. The Packers at pick number 25 draft Amarius Mims, the offensive tackle from the University of Georgia. The big question here is, of course, the sample size, 8 career starts. But at this stage in the draft, it's hard to pass it up. And you know, they have a player in Zach Tom who can move all over your front. I think that gives you so much flexibility to draft a player like this, and he really feels like a Green Bay Packer. So I'm going with Amarius Mims at 25. At 26, the Bucs, they moved on from Shaq Barrett this offseason. I have them going with the most explosive first step in the draft off the edge, and that's Chop Robinson from Penn State. He goes to Tampa Bay at 26. The Cardinals, they got Marvin Harrison Jr. at pick number 4. The board falls really well for them here. They get Terrion Arnold sitting on the board at 27. I have them gobbling him up real quick. So that's Arizona's double dip, is Marvin Harrison and Terrion Arnold in this mock. The Bills at pick number 28 to draft wide receiver Xavier Legette from South Carolina. Obviously, the team moved on from Stephon Diggs this offseason. They need some help in the wide receiver room. That's a little bit of a different dynamic than a lot of the slot guys that Buffalo has when you consider they also lost Gabe Davis this offseason. So Xavier Legette to the Bills. The Detroit Lions at pick number 29. Cooper DeJean, defensive back from the University of Iowa. I was between him and Kool-Aid McKinstry. I ultimately go with Cooper. The versatility that he has in the secondary, the ball skills, I think that's a big dividing factor when you consider Kool-Aid. He's really good in coverage, but the ball production is not necessarily there. And when you contrast that to Cooper, I think it's enough to push it Cooper's way. The Ravens draft for need, but they also get the kind of the last of the tackles that I would feel really good about getting with a top 40 pick, and that's Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma at 30 to Baltimore to replace what they lost on the right side with Morgan Moses, who they traded to the Jets. The San Francisco 49ers drafted defensive lineman Darius Robinson from Missouri. This team loves adding defensive talent up front. They cannot have enough of it. They love to rotate guys. I think Robinson, with his scheme flexibility and alignment flexibility, makes a lot of sense for San Francisco. So I have them going with Darius Robinson. And then Kingsley Suama'atia, the offensive tackle from BYU, is the selection at number 32 for the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning Super Bowl champions. So that is my first round. We're going to run through it one more time, 1 through 32, just to recap my final 2024 NFL mock draft. Caleb Williams to the Bears, Jaden Daniels to the Commanders, Drake Maye to the Patriots, quarterbacks 1 through 3. Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals at 4. Things get off the rails with J.C. Latham going to the Chargers at 5, J.J. McCarthy going to the Giants at 6. And we're back on chalk with the Titans and Joe Alt at pick number 7. Jacksonville trading up almost 10 spots to go up to number 8 and draft Malik Nabers, the wide receiver LSU. The Chicago Bears stay at 9 and draft Byron Murphy. The New York Jets at 10 draft Rome Odunze from Washington. The Vikings at 11 draft Bo Nix. The Eagles trade up 10 spots for Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo to 12. The Raiders at 13 draft Michael Penix. The Saints at 14 draft Olu Fashanu. The Colts at 15 draft Brock Bowers. The Falcons, after dropping down almost 10 spots, they draft Dallas Turner, player I think they would have gotten in the top 10 anyway. The Bengals at 18 draft Talise Fuaga to be their right tackle long-term. The Rams add Leatu Latu, the edge rusher from UCLA. And the Steelers add Troy Fatanu from Washington, the offensive lineman, to round out the top 20. The Dolphins at 21 land Jared Verse, the pass rusher from Florida State. The Broncos, after trading down 10 spots, draft Brian Thomas, wide receiver from LSU. The Vikings land with their second first-round pick, Nate Wiggins, the corner from Clemson. The Cowboys add Xavier Worthy to their wide receiver room at 24. The Packers draft Amarius Mims at number 25. The Buccaneers add to their pass rush room with Chop Robinson at 26. Terrion Arnold slips. The Cardinals take advantage. They get best player available at 27. The Bills add to their wide receiver room as a part of that remodel with Xavier Legette from South Carolina at 28. The Detroit Lions at 29 draft a versatile defensive back who's a real good tackler in Cooper DeJean. He's got ball skills, too. A lot to like there. The Ravens at 30 draft Tyler Guyton to replace their right tackle. The 49ers at 31 add Darius Robinson, defensive lineman from Missouri. And the Kansas City Chiefs at pick 32 add Kingsley Suama'atia, the offensive tackle from BYU. That is my final 2024 NFL mock draft. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys enjoyed the ride. We will be live on YouTube on this channel for nights 1 and nights 2 of the 2024 NFL Draft. So hit subscribe. Come on back. See us tonight. I guess tomorrow night, technically. This is going to post just before midnight, it looks like. And I hope to see you there. I'm Kyle Krabs, Locked On NFL Scouting. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. And I hope to see you all again tomorrow night for our Round 1 live stream.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.